Hello, party people, and welcome to the Making Musicians podcast, the podcast that wants to put the tools in your hands to make you the best music teacher you could possibly be. This episode is simultaneously excellent and partially cut off because we didn't quite get the front end recorded the way we wanted to. We are just jumping into the middle of a conversation about the brain and what got me, Allison, interested in it when I was beginning to teach music and why it was so important. We are discussing here how this really came about when my son was born and was diagnosed with autism, and when I finally realized that, oh my goodness, I am also autistic. So join us for the conversation. I hope you enjoy it. You are going to love everything that Paul Elmore has to say. Have a good listen. So because of my atypical brain, I really wanted to understand what was going on in the brain that I could then, if I felt like if I could understand it, then I could work with it well. Sort of like, you know how doctors for thousands of years didn't know what germs were?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, if I feel like I'm missing something huge here, because I was working with myself and I was working with my son and I was working with all these autistic students. And I was like, I feel like I just don't have the right medicine for this. And it took me into a space where I was really looking into the brain and what was going on. And I kind of was able to distill what happens in the brain and find out a lot of stuff about it that actually really practically helped me. If you're going to imagine the brain of your student as it's learning music, you would imagine it as a Porsche 911 on a kid's shoulders. Because Porsche 911s, they're actually rear-engined cars, and I love rear-engined cars, but they're rear-engined cars and their trunk is in the front. So that's exactly what your brain is like. If you took both your hands and you put it behind your head, that part of the brain is the part that moves you, like physically. If you're singing and you're having to move your voice, if you are playing guitar and you're having to move your fingers, if you're, any sort of physical movement that you need to do automatically happens in the back, like where the engine would be in a Porsche 911. In the front, which is sort of if you put your hand over your forehead and go down an inch, that's kind of where your trunk is, where you remember particular things. So if you're doing music theory or you're trying to learn terms or any of that stuff is happening right behind your forehead. But all your sensory stuff happens in the middle. So basically you've got this huge chunk of space right between your ears. It's the most powerful part of your brain. It's the most instinctual part of your brain. It's where you feel, and it's the driver. So like in that Porsche 911 analogy, it's the thing that is going to decide where you go. So it doesn't matter how well you can play, how well you can move, how well the engine is tuned. It doesn't matter what you know. If your emotions are not in a good place to go, if they're like, I don't want to go anywhere, then you're not going to go anywhere. I'm sure you both know of musicians who are incredibly good, incredibly knowledgeable, and they don't play anymore.
Yeah,
because they don't want to.
absolutely. There's actually a movie about that. The Rocker.
I love that movie.
Yeah, it's a classic, but he just has a terrible, terrible experience in music that puts him off of it entirely. And it takes him like 20 years to rediscover it. And when he rediscovers it, he's just like comes out on the other side of all that terrible kind of 20 years he had without it. Yeah.
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 I actually was just interviewing an amazing conductor who was talking about how he was just this incredible talent who was valedictorian and he got full ride scholarships to everywhere he went. But emotionally, none of his music teachers had taught him how to fail well. They had only taught him that his value was in succeeding. Because they really took care of everything in his trunk and they really took care of his engine, but they never took care of the driver in the middle. And the minute that he failed, he quit. He quit for years. He went and did menial jobs where nobody would pay attention to him. Like he was like, no. So many music teachers end up trying to motivate the driver by saying, look how good your engine is, or look how, packed your trunk is. Don't you want to go? But a driver could a driver could not want to go for like 100 different reasons.
Mm.
But here's the really compelling thing is that midbrain, that center part that really feels, that's going to be important for everybody, right? That's going to be important for a math teacher or an English teacher or whatever. It's going to be important that people want to do what they're doing, but it's way more important for music teachers because the midbrain is actually where music lives. So when you are teaching somebody music, even though you are teaching them to move their bodies and you are teaching their thinking brains behind their forehead, you are engaging their emotional centers, their really strong emotional centers immediately. I always say that because music lives in your midbrain, and your midbrain is where all your instincts are, like that instinct that you get that, oh my gosh, I'm naked, that teaching music is a lot like being with somebody while they're naked. So like you're there, you're in a room with somebody you don't know very well, you just strip down and they're like, well, I can see a lot of room for improvement. Like that's not a great situation to be, right? It feels that way to the brain. I'd like to introduce our expert, who is a fantastic man. He's a teacher, he's a speaker, he's a clinical psychologist, he is a master in learning. Welcome, Paul Elmore, to Making Musicians, a podcast about how to become that teacher. And you are definitely one of those teachers. You do a lot of speaking, you do a lot of counseling. How would you want to describe yourself? What would you want people to know about you?
Wow, that's a good question. I should have thought that one through. Primarily, hands down across the board, the thing that I'm probably most proud of is I got 28 years of marriage under my belt.
Congratulations.
I love my wife more today than the day that I met her. And that is something that I don't think a lot of people can say. And because that's true, as a professional counselor, I now spend most of my day trying to help other couples, other people in relationship, trying to figure out how to do that as well. Because if you haven't noticed, relationships are struggling. People are having a really hard time learning how to relate to each other, learning how to communicate with each other, learning how to respect each other, learning how to just enjoy each other. And I clearly believe that it can absolutely be learned, because this is something you actually don't know when you're born. You're not born knowing how to have perfect relationships. It's a skill, just like basketball or just like piano or guitar or singing. It's a skill that you can learn and you can master. So my job day in, day out is to sit with people who actually want to learn how to do that better. Now, that also translates to my kids. I got 4 kids at home. So those 2 things are the things I'm most proud of that I want people to know me for. Now, the thing that pays the bills is I'm a licensed professional counselor and I've been a counselor for the last 17, almost 18 years now. So I have a extensive history in trauma, abuse recovery, and then marriage and couples and relationship counseling. So those are the bread and butter things I do.
That's awesome. Congratulations on all your years of marriage. That is super cool. That's something I hope to have for myself one day.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to your 4 kids that you mentioned. We talked earlier about how your 4 kids were also involved in music.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to ask, what ages were they exposed to music? Was that kind of something that you guys wanted for them? Was it something that happened naturally?
Yeah.
Was it, and how does that benefit them today?
So that's a great question. So they were kind of doomed from the start. My wife is a music major. So she graduated college, a vocalist, and she doesn't do anything with it now. But that was her desire. That was her passion. So music was in her blood. And then all of our kids got exposed to it early middle school. So late adolescent, or not late elementary, early middle school. I think we did the math the other day, and I have been to over 50 middle school band concerts. And those are the concerts where it is every kid gets to play hot cross buns on their instrument, and everyone gets to clap afterwards, and everyone gets to introduce themselves with one big note. I have sat through purgatory when it comes
It
to
is.
middle school band concerts. And so my daughter's my oldest, and I got 3 boys, so I got 4 kids. My daughter played the flute, and then my second kid played clarinet. My third played percussion, drums, and fourth one is saxophone. So we get to kind of be all over the place with instruments and experiences. My daughter kind of put down the flute after she graduated high school. My son, with the clarinet, he actually decided to see if he could get paid as soon as possible out of high school for playing music. And so he actually enrolled in the National Guard and played with the military band.
Nice.
And so he was going, I can get paid to play, they'll pay for my college, and he loves, physical activity and working out. And so, he thought boot camp was fun. So
Him only.
he's one of those kids. So he did clarinet for a long time, and then he actually taught our youngest how to play saxophone. And now our son, our youngest, who plays saxophone, is just crazy good. I mean, super good. He actually just did a solo competition yesterday, and he submitted that via online stuff that they have to do now with COVID. And then Sam, my middle boy, just loves to hit things, and so he was
as drummers do.
Yeah. So that's when they were exposed. That's what they really enjoyed doing. We've had music all through our family for years and years and years.
And so, just kind of going back to that, how do you feel, or do you feel as though that has benefited them in their other activities in life? Do you feel like that music has helped them maybe create good kind of types of habits that they may have had in their practice? Because obviously they all sound like they were talented musicians. Do you think some of those qualities that they learned from music has kind of come through in other aspects of their life?
Clearly, easily. One of the things that comes with music is just the decision to be diligent at it. You have to just continue to stay engaged, not always when you want to. And so you still strive. I think the thing that comes from it the most, though, is the willingness to try to get good at something. Again, saxophone, clarinet, whatever that is, and then put yourself out there in front of the world and let people see you at different stages along the way, and open yourself up to critique. So again, we have sat in so many solo competitions and regionals and state competitions, and they're always being adjudicated. They're always being critiqued. They're always saying, here's what you can do better. And do they actually listen? Are they going to take this into their life and let it change them? That skill doesn't happen just with, being able to play a scale or playing an instrument. That also plays in character. So when I now sit down with my son going, let me adjudicate you here for a minute. I don't ever use those words because I'm not that kind of a weird father, but let me tell you something you need to work on. Let me tell you how you need to correct this behavior. And because they've been exposed to it in other areas of their life, they're relatively open to it. Now, again, delivery is real important on that, but they're open to saying, okay, I need to get better.
Well, let's talk about that delivery for a second, because as music teachers, we are the ones that are responsible for really being those critics for our students.
Yep.
But critique is a really interesting thing, because critiquing badly can cause really bad results, and critiquing too softly can also give you bad results. You are really a master at helping, you were talking about relationships. You are a master of relationships. And a relationship is really just a culture between two people. What kind of culture is ideal between a teacher and a student to create like an optimal learning situation?
If I could wave my magic wand, this is what I would preach to every teacher, like school teacher, like public school system, like charter school, like private school, because I think we've lost the whole purpose of school. We've lost the whole purpose of teaching, which is we're going to create an environment that is going to be so safe for you to put yourself out there and fail miserably. I mean, just completely crater out. And then you can just pick yourself up and go, what can I do different? Okay, so finish this sentence for me. How do most people finish this sentence? Sometimes you win, sometimes you
lose.
That's the world's kind of approach to it. What if
Mhm.
we change that? Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. What if we were able to tweak it in that way? And so the teacher's job is to say, I want to create an environment where, coming in, perfection is not the expectation, that progress is the expectation, that willingness to both evaluate yourself and then be open to receiving evaluation from me. And that isn't a character attack. That isn't an attack on you or your ego. It's not an attack on you as a person. This is just a skill. So again, as a counselor, I spend all day with people who have been racked with shame their entire life. And what's the difference between shame and guilt? I actually tell people all the time, I want you to learn how to be more guilty. Okay. And most people think I'm the weirdest counselor in the world, because if you feel guilty, it is like, okay, I know that I did something wrong, but I'm still okay. I'm still a good person. I'm still relatively healthy and okay. Person who has shame is, I did something wrong. I'm so terrible. I'm a piece of crap. I'm worthless. I'm no good at this. And I think a lot of people come into a music scenario or any other thing they're trying to learn, and they're afraid of putting themselves out there and failing because it reflects on who they are as a person. And so the teacher gets to now set the entire tone of the relationship, which says, this is what we are doing. We are going to find all the ways to help you get better, which now means we have to find the things you're doing right, first off, and then we have to find all the things that you can improve. Now, I think one of the best ways to do that is the word is called normalize. You can normalize something. So if as a teacher it goes, you know what, here's the piece that I'm working on. I'm just further down the road, and this piece is a lot more complex, but this is the piece that I'm working on. And I keep flubbing up on this one measure here, or I can't get the timing right on this, or I keep trying this and I got to keep going and going. When the teacher actually models it and says, here's how I'm not doing so great, but I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep going back over this phrasing over and over. Now the student goes, oh, that's just normal. I guess that's how we do it. And so I'm going to just keep trying. And now it is not the teacher and the student down here. And the student is always the one who's learning. It's like, we are in this together. This is how we learn. This is how we go through it together. That's the culture that you can create as a teacher.
So
I
just
mean,
trying to kind of become equals with your student and show that, every it's okay to make these mistakes, and
yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm just further down the road. I'm just making mistakes at a much higher level. I mean, you get to mess up in a little recital here in front of your peers, at some local Grange Hall or some local, church or something. I'm messing up in front of the symphony or in front of the orchestra or in
Mhm.
front of, holy cow, the stakes are higher. And look at the mistake I made. Here's if a teacher could do this, look at the mistake I made, and then here's how I recovered from it. Here's how I fixed it. Here's how I changed it, or here's how I redeemed it in some way. That's not about music anymore. That's about life. What does
Yeah.
a student walk away? That's not about, which chords to play on a guitar. That's about, wait a second, maybe I don't have to be afraid in school or, going through life.
Yeah.
That's why the stuff that you guys are doing is so solid, because it's connected to something so deep, and yet it transcends more than just music.
If I could ask a little bit about, that perfect environment that we want to
Mhm.
create, where are teachers, you think, commonly going wrong? Because I think a lot of teachers, or I hope, right, that most are, looking out for the kids. They want the best outcome they can. But what are they making, decisions are they making subconsciously that is affecting that negatively?
Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to like the answer on this one, I don't think, but most teachers focus on content. They believe, if I disseminate information, then I have taught. You're welcome.
Hmm.
I've done my job. Give me my paycheck. That is not teaching. Teaching isn't dispensing information. Teaching is what sticks. What did you learn? Not what did you hear? And most teachers assume that the student has to do the conforming to figure out how to learn best. And that is completely and totally 100% wrong. The teacher's job is to say, who's sitting in front of me? How do they learn best? And how can I take this piece of information, this same nugget, and for this student over here, I need to teach that piece in this methodology or modality. And with this student over here, I take the same content, but I tweak the delivery style because this kid learns it differently. This kid understands it differently. And I am attuned enough to my students to know, here's how I have to adjust. Teachers don't like to adjust. Teachers just like to have, here's my curriculum. I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to deliver it to you. And if you don't get it, that's your problem, not mine. And that is problematic, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That is, that's why so many kids are just hating school at the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What kind of situations, because you're talking about these open situations where kids feel okay to fail.
Yeah.
And they learn best when they are safe to fail.
Yeah.
What are the environments where people are just not going to learn? Are there situations, I mean, because, we always talk about how, people will talk about how, kids are adaptable, they jump right in. Are there situations where people just really actually cannot learn?
Yeah. I use two examples for this. Number one is, do you remember, or you've probably seen it on some movie somewhere, or it might actually be your experience where, again, middle school math, it's the kid who's trying to figure out middle school math, algebra in some way. And you see him sitting at the dining room table, and the father is trying to teach him middle school math by just getting angrier and angrier at him. It's just common sense. I mean, you just X and Y equals Z. Can't you get it? And the kid can't get it. But what does he do? In that moment, he is not in a learning brain. He's actually in a survival brain. That part of you that says, I don't like the experience that I'm in right now, and I actually am not in a mental state to actually process new information. I can't actually learn. Instead, all I'm doing is focusing on surviving. And so that means, what do I need to do to get out of the situation? What do I need to do to placate the person? What do I need to do to just stop feeling so bad in this situation? And so you're not actually learning any content at that moment. Same thing applies if you take that same kid and you put him at a desk, and you put the desk in the middle of the busiest intersection in town, and you say, okay, I need you to learn this algebra concept as cars are whizzing by 6 inches from his head. Can anyone learn in that? No, not at all. Because again, the environment itself is now no longer safe. And so information cannot come in. So as teachers, again, music teachers, we have to be aware of the environment on two levels. One is, what's the environment that we are creating as musician instructors? Is our studio safe? Is our time with our kids safe? Are we relatable and kind and patient and all those other things? But the second thing you have to be aware of is, this kid might be coming out of, or even an adult might be coming out of, a crappy home environment, things that are beyond your control. You can't control anything beyond, your half hour scheduled time to work with them. And yet, when you're done working with them, they go back into a battlefield, they go back into a war zone, and they are in survival brain. And trying to get them to shift from war zone, survival brain, to now I have to learn how to play a Dorian scale. How do I do that? Why do I do that? When do I do that? And then go back. Their learning brain isn't turned on at the moment.
Sorry, Gavin, you go ahead.
I just kind of want to build off that a little bit. As a teacher, are there common red flags that might be shown by the student to identify if they are in that kind of, battlefield of a learning environment? Are there ways that a teacher can kind of modify what they're doing, or try to identify that this is happening with them, and then also play to it in their teaching, and how can they support them in those situations?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. One is, that they have the intellect, that they have the cognitive ability to comprehend what you are saying, and it is just not working. So you're going, wow, A and B isn't lining up to equal C here. So there's something going wrong. And when you're going at it at, again, 3 or 4 different modalities or approaches, and it's still not sinking in, that probably is telling you, okay, there's something else going on. The other things you're going to see is, and again, I'm going to try to make it more specific for your guys' industry. I don't know if any of you have had that student that you show them something, and then they they have a quick agreement. They go, oh, okay, I know how to do that. That's great. And you think, good, I've done a good job as a teacher. Well done. Good job, me. And yet they actually can't execute it. So that quick agreement is actually a version of escaping or avoidance. It's like, okay, just I don't want to be in this anymore. And so they're actually trying to avoid the situation in some way. The other thing that happens, hold on. The other thing that happens is I see ambiguity. So you ask them, hey, did you practice this week? I sure did. How'd it go? It went great. How long did you practice? I practiced a lot. You don't know anything yet, because in their mind, a lot can be 20 minutes just before you started. I actually have a lot of clients do that, where they do their homework about 20 minutes before they come into session with me. It's like, okay. So you actually have to be more specific. How long did you practice, on which days? And so that ambiguity, again, is that avoidance piece that are going, okay, wait a second. I'm trying to project that I am better than I actually am, because I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to look, incompetent. I want to make sure that I avoid some sort of punitive interaction with you in some way. So those kind of behaviors around kind of the tasks and things like that. If you want some more kind of psychological things to look for, um, avoiding eye contact is a huge thing. Inability to kind of regulate their bodies. So again, that could be just ADHD, but it's also they've got something going on physiologically, because all that energy is just stirred up somewhere.
Sure.
Or again, the irrational responses. So they play the scale and they get the last note wrong and they burst into tears. That's not quite proportional to what we're working on here. There might be something else going on. And you can now go, that seems to be out of proportion. We probably need to figure out how to regulate their emotions before we can get them back in that learning state, before we try to teach them about, how to cross over their fingers so they can get that last note on the tonic or whatever it is.
Can I ask you about?
I'm filling out all the musical terms I know. So
This is great. Yeah,
use them
nailing
all
it.
up here in
So
about 5
impressed with
minutes.
all your musical, Dorian scale, yeah.
Can I
You
ask?
win.
The group setting, right?
Yeah.
Like, so there'd be one kid that maybe is coming in with this, these like things that you're noticing, right? These red flags, but the others are there, ready, they practiced. How do you manage the environment to include everybody in the lesson that you're trying to teach?
How do you include everyone in the environment that you're trying to teach when you have the one kid who's kind of not in that emotional state?
Yes.
That's a great question. Are we talking in person here, or are we still talking kind of group Zoom distance learning kind of stuff?
I think it can be applied to both, but in my particular scenario, I think it is Zoom. Yeah.
So we're doing it remotely here.
Mm-hmm.
First off, hands down across the board, the one thing you don't want to do is to point it out and go, hey, in front of everybody, hey, it looks like you're really struggling. Is there something going on? Is there something wrong? If you're going to now shine this spotlight on him, that's the worst thing that can happen, because he's probably doing everything he can in that survival brain to not have any sort of negative attention on him whatsoever. So, the first thing you do is you're just going to notice it for yourself, and then you're going to probably do some sort of evaluation. So one of the things that happens is in groups, we as teachers, we always ask the question, hey, who wants to do X, Y, or Z? And you wait for volunteers. And this is the kid who's never going to volunteer. So instead, I think it's better to say, hey, Johnny, I need you to do this for me. Would you be willing to give this a shot? And again, you kind of set that up at the very beginning. I'm going to call on people. It's not because I'm picking on you, but because I want you to get the most out of this. And you can kind of ask him to do something that might be not as challenging as everything else, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to give him the small win. You're trying to give him something that he can be successful in, because again, even if it's skill level not as high as everyone else, if he can go, I saved face, I had a success in front of the group, and now I feel good.
Mhm.
Again, that's about an emotional investment, maybe not a skill investment.
Sure.
But if you don't address the skill investment, sorry, if you don't address the emotional investment, then the skill investment will always fall behind because they're not in that learning brain, they're in that survival brain.
Hmm.
So give them a small win in some way possible.
I think that is an incredible point. This giving a small win. I think that's something that probably not enough teachers do enough of, especially when they have, maybe just the one student that's really really struggling. I think that's very insightful.
Yeah.
Another technique that I've seen, actually, a couple of the things that you've said, Paul, have kind of reminded me of some techniques that I see Jake use sometimes when I watch his lessons, which is the first one is he always starts his lessons, and actually you do too, Gavin, with talk to me about your practice this week and I'll tell you about my practice this week, which is, yeah, you should, well, I'll have you describe it in a second, Jake, but they essentially do an up thumb, a sideways thumb, or a down thumb. Did you get as much practice as you wanted?
Yeah.
Which is a really cool, specific way to do that. And then the other thing is, so that's just one of the techniques that we do in the school and that Jake does really well. And Gavin does the same sort of thing with a number system, 1 through 10.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, so let's say you've got that one kid who's really struggling. Do you remember, Jake, when we had in one particular group, a girl who would make a mistake and just immediately turn off her camera?
Oh yes.
Oh yeah. We won't use names for the purpose of the podcast, but do you remember what you ended up doing?
Well, first it was, give the space, like let them have their camera off for a sec. They felt the need to do it. The second was asking other people, be like, hey, have you ever made a mistake in this class or a class before? Has something like that happened before?
Yeah.
And we actually ended up talking about sports. We talked about like gymnastics, I think. Like sport tryouts. What's it like to not make the team? What's it like to lose a game? Because those were things that other people could relate with. She pops back in saying, oh my gosh, I just had this meet and we got second place and it was devastating. Boom. But she's ready to talk about it, right?
Yeah. Yep. You found a way to connect.
Yeah.
Another question you can ask is, instead of, how did your practice go this week, is what did you learn this week, or what did you improve in this week? It's now specific and measurable, and it gives them that small win again.
Yeah.
So it's not just a random quantity, but it is now a quality. What did you learn?
Mm-hmm.
I learned, again, how to cross over my hands, or I learned pacing, or I learned, what pianissimo means, or whatever else it is.
Yeah. Oh, again, great with the terms.
Thanks. I've only got about 3 more, so I got them written down here. I'm trying to figure out where I can work them
really
in.
hold them in.
Yeah.
You can start naming musicians,
Yeah, I think that is really important though to really just show what you not have, ask them what did they actually learn this week, because it doesn't only give specifics and actually measurable data to what they learned in practice, but it reaffirms for them, kind of, this is, I learned this, like I can know this, and then in their lesson you can go over it, of course, but
and even you share that, hey everyone, this is what I learned today, as I'm working with my guy who's teaching me stuff, and I'm improving my thing. I learned this complex whatever. My wife and I, you guys are doing a podcast here, my wife and I do a marriage podcast. We put out 2 episodes a week, and it is her and I talking about the latest fight we had, or the latest thing that we struggled with. It is just a very real, down and dirty relationship podcast. And I've had more of my clients come in going, it was so refreshing to hear that the counselor, the guy who's supposed to be smart and helping me fix my problems, have the exact same problems that I do, and hearing how you worked it out. So again, it normalizes it. Rather, it's like we are doing this rather than here I am sitting on high, dispensing my wisdom upon the masses. You're welcome for my greatness.
I think the thing about everything that you're saying is that, if I was going to summarize it, it's that as a teacher, if your first priority is not making sure that the feeling brain is in a good space, then you are never going to have access to that learning brain.
Correct.
So you and I before, Paul, have talked about the analogy of the brain is sort of a Porsche, where you
Yeah.
have, the hindbrain, and we talked about this earlier in the podcast, where you have the hindbrain that acts like the engine that really does the moving, and that you have the forebrain that's like the trunk that really holds all the information.
Yep.
And then the middle, the driver, is the one that you have to get in a good place, because if the driver is not in a good place, if those emotions aren't in a good place, then you're not going anywhere. Doesn't matter how well packed the engine is, and it doesn't matter how well the engine is tuned, you're a mess.
Yeah.
If you had 3 things right off the top of your head that you would say are the most important things that teachers could do to create the kind of space where drivers would want to drive, the kind of emotional space that makes drivers feel confident behind the wheel, what would those 3 things be?
What would be the 3 things that help students walking in and get them into the best state of learning?
Yes.
Is that the question I'm hearing?
Yeah, it was a little convoluted, but yep, you got it right. The way I said it was convoluted.
Yeah. So first off would be absolutely keep it simple. If you only have half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour with this student, too many people try to do too much in a too short of period of time. If you can stick with 1, maybe 2 concepts, and you just keep hitting that from different angles, but the thing that they walk away with is, here's the one thing we're going to work on today. This is the one topic. This is the one skill. This is the one practice we're going to do. Because again, I think our own insecurities as teachers show up going, we're getting paid for this. We want to give them the most value for what they are doing. So we equate value with quantity. And that's actually a misnomer. Value is quality. I'd rather have someone walk away with 3 life-changing principles than 20 mediocre principles that they don't remember anything. So clarity, focus, simplicity is absolutely essential. And it actually calms down the brain of the student, because if they're coming in going, oh, I got to juggle all these things, and I got to figure out how all this works together, and how do I manage all this? Again, they're information overload. They're more focused again on, how did I pack the trunk in the car? And is the trunk going to fly open as I'm driving down the road and I'm going to, crash? We don't want that. One suitcase, put one suitcase in the trunk, and then that's all you got to do. Drive to your destination, offload the suitcase, put a new suitcase in, drive to the next place. This metaphor is going to break down somewhere along the way, but I think you're getting the idea.
Yeah.
Right? So that would be the first thing. It would be absolutely keep it simple. The other thing, and this is profound how well this works. Our brain is designed to find patterns. We love patterns. This is why earworms get stuck in our head. You can hear that ba 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 ba. And what are we talking about now? We're talking about McDonald's.
Yeah.
Or that's why jingles are, 6, 8 notes long, and it's the same ones over and over again, and they become earworms. I made the mistake of, I was on Instagram last night, just flipping through stuff, and there's these, again, I am not the social media guy. So there's these stories, there's whatever, you can click on it, and there are these little memes, and there's a song, shark baby shark, baby something.
Oh, welcome.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
You guys heard this thing?
I haven't, no.
Oh, lucky you, Gav. That's
I'm a 50-year-old father and husband. My kids are all grown, and I woke up this morning going, baby shark, but dot 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 dot. I was like, are you kidding me?
I've heard that. Okay, that's what that is. Okay.
I've been cursed. Something has gotten stuck in my head. Our brains are designed for patterns. This is why rhyming works so good. So kids learn rhymes when they're young. I actually have a favorite pastor, and every sermon he does, he has something in it that rhymes. The main topic, the one main topic of the message usually has something to rhyme. I can remember a message he gave several years ago, And the whole question is, what do you do when it dawns on you you're the most powerful person in the room? I mean, I can remember that now. What do you do when it dawns on you? That has meter, has rhythm, it has raw, it has it's almost melodic, right? When we create, when we understand the brain's wired for patterns, now we can start to come up with ways to make things stick. Again, I took music lessons as a kid. Believe it or not, I took organ lessons. I grew up in the 70s.
Oh,
We had an
Ooh.
organ in our front room, the 2 keyboard thing and the keys. And
so
the
do
only
I.
thing I remember about the organ teacher was he smelled like cigarettes. And he rode a motorcycle. That's the only that's the only thing I remember, which is actually probably really important. I'll come back to that, why that is important in a minute. Every good boy does fine.
Oh,
That's a music thing, right?
Yeah, it is.
As a female, I would like to submit that it's actually every gorgeous beauty deserves fudge, but you can go ahead and have your own space.
I grew up again in the 70s, so every good boy. I cannot tell you if that is a treble clef or a bass clef, but I do know it has a thing to do with music, right? I can't tell you if it's spaces or lines, but I know it's a music thing. Patterns, it now sticks. So our job is to come up with creative ways to play into those patterns. So that'd be the second thing. So story plays into the similar thing. And here's the most important thing as well. The things we remember the most are the things that have the highest emotional charge. So I can ask you guys right now, where were you on September 11th, 2001? Can you tell me where you were when you saw the towers being hit or when you heard about it? Everyone can. I can tell you exactly where I was. It has a high emotional charge. And at that point, we don't actually have to work at remembering. None of us here said, I should remember where I'm standing right now or where I heard that. We don't actually have to consciously try to remember, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things that have a high emotional charge automatically get remembered. That's why story actually produces some of the greatest ability to remember, because our brain is wired for story and relationship and not for data. So if I just tell you, be nice, okay, that's just data. But if I tell you a story of the Good Samaritan, or if I tell you a story of the guy who saved the puppy and, nursed it back to health, there's a video right now on YouTube about a Scottish guy biking around the world, and he finds a kitten, motorcycle or bicycle, biking around. He finds this little kitten. It is my favorite story on YouTube. He adopts this kitten. He puts it in a little bag. It travels with him the restaurant. It's a wonderful story.
That's
And
so cool.
again, I don't have to work hard to remember it. Things that have a high emotional charge automatically get remembered. This is what every teacher needs to remember. So several years ago, I was the program director of a challenge course. If you don't know what a challenge course is, that's where you go up into the forest and you strap yourselves into climbing harnesses and you climb 40, 50 feet up a tree, and you do activities like standing on a platform or walking across a log or jumping off a platform or doing a zip line. And all these are designed to learn, to teach. It's experiential learning. And the reason that we did those kind of things, and we actually did it with a very specialized population. We took women who had been sexually abused. And so I have 12 women, all have a trauma history. And now I am the male facilitator. All of them have been victimized by abusive men. I'm now the guy on the ground holding the rope as they are 40 feet in the air. And I'm saying, go ahead and step off that platform. I've got you safe.
Nice.
Do you think that that's an emotional experience for them?
No, it's
You should hear the language that comes out of some of those ladies' mouths.
I bet.
But it's so different than just sitting in an office and going, tell me your story. I understand you were traumatized and I'm a safe person. Go ahead and just talk to me. That's a very different experience than I've got the rope that's going to literally hold you safe and I can get you down to the ground safely. I always tell people I can do 6 months of therapy in 2 days on a challenge course, because it is holistic, it is highly emotional, and I don't have to worry about teaching anything. The experiences teach everything. And I've had some of those women land on the ground and then come over and just weep, embrace me and just weep and said, I didn't think I could ever trust a man ever again. This has been transformative in my life. Thank you for proving that not every man out there is a horrible human being. And that's just one moment. Now, I know for a fact, because music touches into this emotional part of our brain, because music is evocative. Again, watch some of these videos on YouTube where babies hear music for their first time and they start to weep or they start to cry, or again, it wires into our brains in all sorts of amazing ways. You guys have such a beautiful opportunity to provide these experiential and highly emotional environments for kids, for adults, for everybody, where they can learn to touch different parts of themselves inside. That I'm jealous, because I don't get to do that, again, just doing talk therapy with clients anymore. I'd rather do what you guys do sometimes.
Well, so let me pop in there, because one of the things that will frequently happen to teachers, particularly music teachers, because of that it being connected to the emotional side, is every once in a while you'll go, am I a counselor? Am I not a counselor? But the interesting thing about that story with the rope swing, even though it was specifically a counseling situation, it could have been equally effective had it not been a counseling situation. And music lessons aren't counseling situations.
No.
But in the right environment, it can provide a lot of mental health. I'll tell you a story. So I have a young lady, and she has been taking lessons from me for a long time. Sweet, sweet girl. By long time, I mean like 10 years. She had a season, though, where, I mean, she was in the 7th grade, nothing's consistent. Her brain's all squishy and she's not doing work, but she had this goal. She wanted to go to a competition. And we spent time every week. And I would say to her, we're getting ready for this competition. We've got this much time. And, looking at this piece is probably going to take about 30 hours to learn. So how long did you get to practice this week? And she would say, I didn't get to practice this week. This and this and this is okay. Well, we're 1 week down, but we can still get this done. We can absolutely still get this work done. We've got 10 more weeks. That's 3 hours a week. Totally doable. 9 weeks left. She comes in. All right. So, we've got 30 hours to get this stuff done. How much did you practice? Oh, and here comes the story. And I say, okay, well, we can get at least one practice hour done here in lessons. And the weeks tick by, and they tick by, and they tick by, until it's the week that she is supposed to be recording, and she has not practiced a lick in 10 weeks. And she comes in, and we set up the recording situation. I'm being quiet and just sort of present in a way that's really positive, but I'm not lying to her either. I'm not going, this is going to be fantastic. Woohoo. I'm just like, all right, let's go ahead and give this a try. And we record for about 45 minutes, and it does not go well. And she sits down after she says, you know what, that's enough. I'm not going to record anymore. We sit down and I ask her, how are you doing? And tears start to roll down her face, because she knows that it wasn't good enough, and she knows exactly why it wasn't good enough. And I didn't have to tell her, you know what, that was not good enough. You should have done better. She knows. And she didn't have any excuses. She didn't go, at that point, she wasn't like, well, I didn't practice because of this. I didn't practice because of this. She just said, I don't feel very good about that. And I say, well, you had a long time to practice this too. And she has more tears down her face. I'm not lying to her. I'm not being rough, but I'm letting her know. You had a long time. More tears running down her face. And she's not looking at me. She's looking away. And I took the opportunity right then, because I was looking at her And you know how you were talking about guilt and shame.
Mhm.
And right in that moment, I did one thing that I wouldn't have done when I was a young teacher. But luckily I had a couple of years under my belt, and I said, you know, I would like you to look at my face so that you can tell that I'm not lying to you. And she looks at me, and she's just barely keeping her chin up looking at me because she doesn't really want to fully face me. And I look at her, and all I said, I didn't try to counsel her. Now, what do you think are the reasons that you didn't? And how can we? I just said other things that were true. I said, you know, even though you didn't practice, and even though you are not going to make it into this group, and even though this recording was not good, I still really like you. And I am still excited for you to come to lessons. And I think you are going to be a great player. And she looked at me, and that's when the real tears happened. She just lost it. She just lost it. I wasn't trying to be her counselor, but it's an interesting thing because when you put somebody in a situation where there is fear and then they're safe, they will never ever ever forget that. I don't think. And those sorts of things are what create those mid-brain things. And here I am talking to you, and I asked you on here to be a guest so that you could talk to us. Thank you, Paul, for listening to that far too long story.
I actually have a name for it. I say you have to skip the teachable moment because you have to go to the three things. Keep it simple, high emotions, cement the learning, and then you just identify the third one, which is empathy. Empathy, and which is what every human being should have, not just paid counselors, not just paid professionals. You don't need 2 master's degrees like I have to be able to empathize. Some of the most empathetic and transformative people can be people you meet on the street, or janitors, or guy who pumps your gas, or the guy who just looks at you in the right way, in the right tone, and connects with you in that moment. Again, I can remember my 2 boys, they got some money for Christmas, and they went to the store and they found these really cool remote control cars, and they were just terrible, crappy cars. And I knew it, but they were young enough that they were shiny and cool looking. And they said, Dad, we really want these things. I said, I can totally understand it. They're not great quality. It's your money, though. You can decide, we really want them. We really, are you sure? If they break, we can't bring them back. They're kind of on discount. We'll be really careful. We promise. They get them home. Not even 2 hours later, they're both in pieces. They're just shattered. And I can still remember standing in the dining room. They come to me with these handful of parts, and they're both crying, Dad, our car's broke. And at that moment, I have a decision to make. I can either be that parent that goes, boys, I told you, if you would have just listened to me, I could have saved you this heartache, and I could have driven home the teachable moment. But that would not have spoken to their hearts. So instead, what I did is I went, man, it just sucks when something looks so good and it just falls apart. I am so sorry, guys. This stinks. And they go, yes, can we take it back? No, we can't take it back. Can you give us more money? No, I can't give you more money.
There we
I
go.
mean, they're problem solving. It's good for them. Good job. Can't do that. And you let the experience teach them. Our job is to guide the emotional experience. And again, to be present, to be nearby, and to say, I will still accept you as a human being, because I guarantee you, some of the students you sit with, you will be the only person in their life who says something like that to them. Everything else is performance based in their life. And so why not be those people? Why not be the people who speak into them in that way? So simple, high emotions, and then empathy.
Paul, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
I'll just say that I really, really appreciate your time and all of the stuff that you taught us today. Do
Yeah,
you
thank you for your insight. Yeah, that was incredibly inspirational for me, and yeah, thank you very much for being on.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I can't wait to see how this podcast grows and how your school grows, and more importantly, to all the lives that you're going to be impacting. Again, children to adults to adolescents to everyone you guys get to sit with. When you have a group of people, all of your teachers, all of your facilitators, with that common task, with that common purpose of we're going to change human beings through, we just happen to teach music. That's a pretty good way to spend a day. I mean, there's no downside to that. So guys, I'm jealous, and I hope it just, takes off. So thank you for inviting me and letting me be part of one of the early episodes of your podcast.
Yeah. So, Paul, let's say that someone is a music teacher here who also just happens to be married and really, really wants some good tips on how, or some good a good resource.
Yeah.
Like you.
Yeah.
For a marriage. I happen to know that you have a really, really good program. So how do people get a hold of you? We'll put it in the show notes, but how do they do it?
Yeah, if you wanted to find just different ways to connect with me, two primary ways: paulelmore.com. Last name is Elmore, paulelmore.com. That's more of my practice, my counseling side. The other thing is securemarriage.com. Secure Marriage or Secure Marriage Podcast. So just pick your favorite podcast player, do a search under Secure Marriage, hit subscribe, and you'll find out more about me than you ever wanted to learn. You're going to find out all about the ways I screw up with my wife and dumb things I've done as a husband years ago, and just things I wish I didn't ever have to talk about. But
well, for the benefit of everybody.
We do it for the benefit of everyone. So those are the two primary ways people can find out just more of the stuff that I put out there. And there's lots of ways to contact me through both of those. So if they ever wanted to actually, reach out, we'll be glad to do that.
Great. Paul, grateful to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Enjoy your night, guys.
Thank you.
Well.
This has been the Making Musicians podcast. I'd like to invite you to partner with us in our mission to revolutionize the music education industry. I think you can agree that this was definitely one of the podcasts that would be revolutionary if all music teachers did what Paul just said, those three things. Then we could really start impacting students the way we want to. If you'd like to join our teaching staff or join a coaching group to improve your teaching skills with some more direct coaching, then you can visit our website at www.iamschoolofmusic.com. You can, Jake, you got to do it again, man. You got to do, this is your space.
Oh, yeah. Smash that like button. And don't forget to subscribe.
Forever and ever, I'm just going to make you, smash that like button wherever you're getting us. If you're getting us in a podcast, check out our, it always energizes me towards the end of this thing. Be sure to connect with all of our socials. We're at I Am School of Music on Instagram and Facebook. And of course, if you want an in-depth look on how to become that teacher, you can order my book right now. It is ebook, it is physical book, and it's audiobook, because that's how I get my books. I can't sit and read, for goodness sakes. Who has time to sit and read? But we did it in audio, and you can find it at www.iamschoolofmusic.com/book. All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you for being here, gentlemen. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
All right. Thank you.